It was a quiet afternoon in Cebu City when the world seemed to pause. A convoy of black SUVs slid into the hospital entrance. The city buzzed with curiosity and unease. Inside, a Saudi prince, visiting the Philippines for diplomatic talks, suddenly collapsed in the lobby. Security froze, unsure how to respond. Panic threatened to erupt. Doctors and staff rushed forward, their voices tense, controlled. The prince's breathing was shallow. Monitors beeped an alarm. A crowd of onlookers gathered, but one figure stepped forward, unnoticed by security. She was not on the official roster. Her ID badge didn't exist in the hospital system. She was a Filipino nurse, off-duty but present, guided only by instinct. Maria Cruz had been working in a small clinic on the outskirts of Cebu for years. Today, she had accompanied a friend to the hospital for routine tests. She never imagined that her hands would be the ones to steady a figure of global power. She moved without hesitation, placing her hand gently on his chest, guiding his airway. The hospital staff paused, unsure. Protocols were clear. No unauthorized personnel could touch a VIP patient. But the prince's condition deteriorated rapidly. Sweat glistened on his forehead, and his lips turned pale. Maria ignored the hesitations around her. She focused on his breathing, adjusting his posture. Every second counted, and no rule mattered more than life itself. Security hovered, watching. Their radios crackled with commands. They didn't understand why this unknown nurse was stepping into a scene they had rehearsed countless times. But Maria's movements were precise. Years of nursing in understaffed clinics had taught her to act in chaos. Every action she took was deliberate, every motion a shield against death. Dr. Alvaro, the hospital's head of emergency care, finally approached. His eyes narrowed, initially suspicious of the woman in plain clothes. "Who are you?" he demanded. Maria's voice was calm, even as adrenaline coursed through her veins. "I'm a nurse. Let me help him. Please." There was authority in her tone, not challenge, but certainty. For a moment, the room held its collective breath. Doctors and aides glanced at each other, debating silently. Protocol versus necessity. The prince's pulse was weakening. The decision was made quietly, almost unconsciously. Maria's hands guided the emergency procedure. She adjusted 4 lines, assisted with oxygen, checked vitals, all without a single misstep. Outside, the hospital's grand lobby seemed surreal. Cameras flashed, capturing the chaos. Reporters whispered, security murmured. But inside, Maria's world was only him. The prince, fragile, human, dependent on a stranger's touch. In that room, hierarchy meant nothing. There was no title, no wealth, only life hanging by a thread. The prince gasped, opening his eyes briefly. Panic flickered across the faces of those around him. But Maria remained calm. Her voice was soft, almost maternal, encouraging the patient to focus on breathing. She monitored his oxygen, palpated the pulse, and reassured the staff quietly. The room shifted from tension to coordination, led by hands that weren't supposed to be there. Minutes passed like hours. The hospital had been ready for VIP emergencies, but nothing in their protocol prepared them for someone unlisted to take control. Maria continued, unrelenting, treating the prince with humility that commanded respect. She never sought recognition. She never stopped to consider the consequences of stepping out of line. The emergency team slowly adapted. Dr. Alvaro assisted, following her lead, while other nurses prepared equipment. Security, still wary, kept their distance. The prince's breathing stabilized gradually. Every shallow gasp grew steadier. Maria's intuition, homed in quiet clinics and under-resourced wards, became the center of the room's rhythm. Outside, the public had begun to notice. Rumors spread. A prince in danger, a mysterious woman intervening. Social media lit up with questions and speculation. But inside, no one spoke of fame, only survival. Every adjustment Maria made was meticulous, professional, and almost invisible. In the shadow of wealth and authority, her quiet heroism shone. After 20 tense minutes, the prince was stable enough to be moved. Maria guided him carefully to a private room, ensuring he remained conscious and calm. The hospital staff followed silently, their earlier resistance replaced by gratitude, even awe. For a moment, the hierarchy of protocol and title faded entirely. The prince, now lying on a hospital bed, looked at her with a mixture of confusion and relief. He could not speak English well. She did not speak Arabic fluently. Yet, in that quiet exchange of human connection, communication transcended language. It was understanding without words, life saved by a hand that should not have been there. Maria stepped back, allowing the official medical team to take over monitoring. She did not seek acknowledgement, nor did she linger for praise. Her shift had never been scheduled for heroism. She had only acted as she had been trained, guided by the moral imperative that care is above rank, wealth, or title. Dr. Alvaro finally spoke, turned security and administrators. She saved him. Without her, we might have lost valuable time. There was respect in his tone, quiet but firm. Security officers lowered their defensive stance, realizing the truth in his words. The unlisted nurse had rewritten the script of authority in that room through action, not title. The prince's aides arrived, whispering urgent questions in Arabic. They demanded to know who had intervened. Maria remained composed, introducing herself simply, downplaying her role. But those who had witnessed the scene could not ignore it. They saw a Filipino nurse, unrecognized by formal hierarchy, command life itself. Word of the incident slowly spread beyond the hospital walls. Journalists reached for statements, yet the narrative was complicated. How could a nurse, off duty, become the center of a VIP emergency? Yet, for locals, it resonated differently. It was a story of quiet courage, a reminder that heroism often lives in the margins, unseen but powerful. Later, Maria returned home, exhausted but unshaken. She prepared dinner for her family, speaking little of the day's events. The prince's life had been saved, yet in her mind it was routine. To her, every patient mattered. Every moment of vigilance, every careful intervention was part of her commitment to humanity, not headlines or recognition. The hospital administrators called for a review of protocol, acknowledging the need to include more flexible response systems. Maria's actions had revealed the gaps in rigid hierarchies. Authority could plan, wealth could command, but neither could replace instinctive care and moral courage. The invisible hand of Filipino dedication had quietly reshaped their emergency response. Weeks later, the prince recovered fully. He returned to Saudi Arabia, his entourage discreetly expressing gratitude. Yet no official fanfare recognized Maria. There were no medals, no press conferences. In the shadows of global authority, her presence remained almost invisible. Her reward the knowledge that human life had been preserved against expectation and hierarchy alike. For Maria, the incident reinforced the moral core of her profession. In clinics, wards, and hospitals across the Philippines, nurses routinely act beyond the call of duty. Their work is often unseen, undervalued, but it carries the quiet weight of survival, empathy, and moral courage. Every patient, rich or poor, receives the same vigilant humanity. The story of the prince and the nurse slowly reached local communities, whispered among neighbors and healthcare workers. It became a symbol of Filipino resilience and care, the kind that does not demand recognition but insists on presence. The narrative was no longer about wealth or title. It was about the soul of service quietly asserting itself. In the month that followed, Maria returned to her regular duties. Clinics were small, understaffed, and often chaotic. But she carried with her the memory of that day, a reminder that every action, however unrecognized, could tilt the scales between life and death. Humility, skill, and courage were her constant companions. Hospital staff who had witnessed the incident began to adjust their attitudes. Authority no longer meant dominance. Collaboration mattered more. They saw how hierarchy could bend under the weight of moral courage. Maria's unlisted presence had disrupted assumptions, challenging everyone to reconsider what truly mattered in moments of crisis. The prince's story, once whispered and then silenced, lingered like a quiet testament. He had been at the pinnacle of power, yet dependent on someone unlisted, unrecognized, yet supremely capable. Filipino humanity, steady and humble, had quietly triumphed in a space dominated by protocol, wealth, and expectation. Maria herself never sought fame. She continued her work in silence, teaching younger nurses the importance of presence, observation, and moral responsibility. Each lesson carried the memory of that afternoon, a subtle insistence that true heroism does not ask permission. It simply acts, guided by skill and conscience. Across Cebu, stories of her intervention circulated quietly. Families, local clinics, and small communities celebrated her courage in hushed tones. It was not a story of grandeur, but of ethical vigilance. The unlisted nurse had reminded the world that heroism need not be recorded in logs or titles to exist or to transform lives. In the end, the prince left the Philippines unharmed. His entourage returned to their duties, enriched by the experience but still distant from its moral center. Maria returned to hers, unchanged in demeanor but strengthened in conviction. In a world obsessed with authority, power, and recognition, her quiet intervention had rewritten the rules of true human care. Cebu's hospital resumed its normal rhythm, yet the echoes of that day remained. One woman's hands had bridged wealth and vulnerability, protocol and necessity. She had reminded a city, a nation, and perhaps the world that moral courage is not defined by title or visibility. It is defined by action, humility, and the unwavering insistence on preserving life.